to be discussing a little bit about a wonderful new product, and Professor Fändrich is the founder of that product, probiotic. A little bit of background: Professor Fändrich is Professor of Transplantation and Immunology. He's the Director of the Department of Applied Cellular Medicine, University of Kiel Hospital in Germany. As a Chief Scientific Officer of f2-M, which is a specialist clinic here in KL. We're currently in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia at the moment. He's a Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in the UK and the President of the European Society of Applied Immunotherapy. There's so many other things that Professor Fandrich has done. He's well published, he's got numerous awards, and a renowned expert. And it's my pleasure, Professor Fandrich, to welcome you today.
Same here, Max. Hello.
So I'm going to start with f2-M probiotic. I know we had this discussion earlier. All probiotics are not, created equally.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tell everybody about why you actually developed your own probiotic. What was the reason for that?
Well, first of all, I got aware of the importance of bacteria back in the years 2000, when scientists tried to decipher the human genome. And it turned out during this human genome analysis that more than 90% of genetic information in our body is of non-human origin. And it's actually that a matter of fact that we contain 10 times more bacteria than human cells. So the question came up, what does that mean? And in which way do these organisms interact with our human cells? So we actually have to consider ourselves as a holobiont, which means it's a mixture of human and non-human cells, which makes everything. And everything means everything. Your mood, your eating behavior, your digestion, your hormones, everything is related to the composition of your bacteria inside. And now the next thing was that I realized that every one of us, you and me, unless we would be identical twins, we would have a different composition of bacteria. And we now know by gene sequencing that we have more than 5,000 different strains. And it is the mother who delivers a baby who passes on her microbiome to the child. Now, that's one thing you really have to keep in mind. The second thing is that while we are running down from the mouth, the throat, the stomach, upper, middle, lower intestines, and then the large bowel, the composition of the bacteria changes. So, given these two facts, that everyone has a different microbiome and the function which are needed are different according to the compartment in your body, I figured, how can a simple probiotic, which contains 5 or 6 bacterial strains,
how could it fix all of these problems?
Yes. Yeah. It might be needed in one person but not in the other. It might be needed up in the stomach but not down there. And so that didn't make sense to me. So I thought we have, and I don't want to take these credits for me alone. It was an old Japanese concept, Dr. Higa, who developed a method to really co-cultivate aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. Aerobic means they like oxygen, anaerobic, they hate oxygen. So the challenge was how to bring them together in culture that they cohabitate and function like an ecosystem. And he was the guy who developed that with his team in Japan. And my colleagues and myself, we took up this idea and we developed this product and brought it along and optimized it. So we have now a product with 33 different bacterial strains, which consists of aerobic and anaerobic. And we feed these bacteria with organic extracts, papaya, berries, linging, other things. And they ferment those and produce highly important antioxidants and enzymes and vitamins, natural vitamins. So it is much more than a probiotic.
I totally agree, and as you know, I'm a big fan of using the product myself. One of the things that I found really interesting when I started to do the research on your product was the fact that you suspend it in a liquid. And with all of these nutrients, and of course it made perfect sense to me that if you were trying to introduce a live probiotic into your gut microbiome, that if it's being fed in a nutrient bath, it makes perfect sense to me. Whereas some of the traditional probiotics on the market that are in capsules and freeze-dried, I mean, I've heard reports that up to 90% of the bacteria is actually dead.
Right.
You know, that's why I love the fact that it's in liquid form.
Well, I agree. The reason why people put it into capsule is that it would not be destroyed by the acid in the stomach. Now, first of all, our product has a pH of about 3.2, which is quite acid. So if you take it fasted in the morning when your stomach has not been activated, and you drink it with a sip of water, then it will go through your stomach within 20 seconds. That can be easily taken by the bacteria without being killed by the acidity in the stomach. And secondly, why I invented this bacterial spray as a spray is if you spray it in your mouth, you distribute it in the oral cavity in million times, and we have the highest density of immune cells in the oral cavity. God has given us that as a filter, because that's the first place where external things come in, right? All the toxins and so on. So the information taking place by spraying it in the oral cavity is immense. And is quite different. And as I mentioned, I have to come back to this point. This product, in comparison to a probiotic, is actively sensing the composition of good and bad bacteria in various parts of your body and individually. And it will support the growth of important protective bacteria in different parts of the body in a different way. And that's not what a supplement can do.
This is what I loved about it, is it wasn't just replacing something that was already there. It's actually learning about your own unique bacteria that's unique to you.
Yes.
And the thing is that because it can then learn about that, it's going to increase all of the good bacteria and actually minimize the harm of the bad bacteria.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. And I think people who are willing to take it, they will learn that I cannot make these claims right now, but you can use it not only to protect your inner barrier, I'll come to that in a second, but you can use it for various problems you face, like a sore throat.
Well, I was telling you earlier that I started on the product last year, and I was using it to try and help my gut recover and do all of those things. And then I started to get a sore throat, mentioned to my wife, I'm getting a bit of a sore throat. She said, isn't that f2-M probiotic, can't you spray that on the sore throat? I thought, I'll try it. Yeah. And one spray on that, and the sore throat went away. So I was completely convinced in the product then, just using it on myself.
Right.
So, but there must be other things that you can use it on as well.
I can tell you from my own experience that if you cut yourself and your skin is bleeding, like if I do my shaving in the morning and I cut and bleed, I take one spray on the open bleeding wound. And you mentioned, I'm a surgeon by profession, and it's absolutely no-go for a surgeon to put bacteria in an open wound. But I learned that good bacteria can kill bad bacteria. And so the wound healing is just terrific. It heals without scarring, and if you spray in an open wound, the wound pain will be eradicated within seconds.
Well,
you won't believe it, but it's really happening.
No, I do believe it, because I was cutting an onion a couple of weeks ago and cut myself and tried it. And I must admit that sometimes you read about these things and you think that almost sounds too good to be true. It's almost like, really, can it do that? But again, the logic come in. The fact is that you were putting good bacteria onto something and it was doing its job, which was to close the wound, to stop bad bacteria going into the body. So I totally got that, and then I came home and my wife had inflamed hands, so skin condition, and I said, let's try Professor Fändrich's probiotic on that. And no, and I haven't used it for washing cars or anything like that. I'm just sticking to the medical side of it. But the amazing thing was she sprayed it on and the itchiness went immediately from her hands, just from the probiotic again.
Yeah, these are medical claims actually which we cannot raise
Yeah.
to that extent because we haven't done the proper clinical trials. But by experience, I can say it works. Also, one other prevention of urinary infections is very important. Helps a lot of people who suffer from permanent antibiotic use. And one other thing which is very exciting to see, a lot of people have an overgrowth of firmicutes. Firmicutes normally comprises 40-50% of bacteria in our gut. But if it overgrows, you have more than 60 up to 70%, then you cannot lose weight anymore.
Ah.
And that happens quite a lot of people when they age. And it especially happens in Western societies where the intake of fibers is getting less and less. And by not eating enough fibers, you narrow down the scope of the diversity in your microbiome. So then you overgrow with firmicutes. And now cows, firmicutes is the bacteria of cow, because cows, they eat just grass, and so they have to absorb any calorie they can get. And if you have too much firmicutes, you will absorb any calorie you take. You cannot lose weight anymore. So by bringing down the firmicutes, by regulating that, that's another measure how you can lose weight as well.
That makes me think then that, you know, taking the right food, of course, is very important and getting the right nutrients, but absorbing those nutrients, it's no good just taking the food if your body can't actually absorb them. So how does the f2-M probiotic help in that regard?
Well, first of all, it produces its own natural vitamins, but secondarily, it really protects the inner lining of the mucosa of the cells inside the gut. And we have a huge variety of different functional cells, endocrine cells, neuron cells, metabolic immune cells. All these different cell types are making the inner barrier. Now what happens is that a certain class of bacteria is able to produce a mucus, which is like an inner barrier. And that protects us from bad pathogenic bacteria to enter the gut. And so there is always a balance between protective and potentially pathogenic bacteria in our body. Because to some extent we need pathogenic bacteria to kill other bacteria as well. Now what happens in modern society, and this is so intriguing if you think about it, that we are permanently exposed to toxins.
Yes, exactly, in our environment everywhere.
We have to eat and we have to breathe. Yeah. And the third thing is our skin. The skin has its own microbiotic flora. Now, coming back to eating, nowadays, you know, food industry uses hormones and antibiotics to make fish and animal stock grow fast. And these antibiotics and hormones are killing specifically the protective bacteria in our gut. So over time, there's a disbalance between good and bad bacteria, I call it, and that leads to what we know and call it leaky gut.
Yes.
Leaky gut has damaged tight junctions which keep the inner barrier together, and these nanopores allow these toxins to enter the gut and to permanently activate immune cells, which causes big inflammation, and secondarily to migrate via the axis from the gut to the brain. And that's why I'm convinced we see such a huge increase in neurodegenerative diseases, like with Parkinson,
Alzheimer's, dementia, etc.
Dementia, ALS, and so on.
Yeah.
And in this sense, it is extremely important to rebalance and restore the inner integrity of your gut wall barrier, and this is what the spray actually can do. And that's, in that sense, it's a very preventive.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like preventing getting these chronic illnesses that are caused by your gut microbiome not being healthy.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful thing. So, I mean, it's great that we can prevent it. So, you know, we study a little bit, we read a little bit, we'd like to try different things, and so we use it. But for people that actually already have these problems, hopefully by using the probiotic and getting their gut flora back into, let's say, good shape, that the symptoms might start to... disappear even.
We have evidence from preclinical experiments we did in inflammatory bowel disease, where you have a leaky gut, that this product can support the repair of the inner barrier, and as it supports the formation of small chain fatty acids, it triggers an immune reaction which is immune regulatory, and that brings down the inflammation. So in that sense, it can actually cure even severe
Some
cases
existing,
of in inflammatory bowel disease and leaky gut.
That's amazing. One of the things I noticed myself is, I think I told you before that I'd run out of the product for a couple of months, and then I got a supply again, and I was at home, and my wife said to me, you know, I'm in such a good mood at the moment, have we done anything different just lately? And I said, you know, I am too. And the thing was, I put it down to is that we'd been back on f2-M for about 2 weeks at that stage. And just explain a little bit more about the relationship between the gut and the brain, because I find that really incredible.
Well, that's a very interesting remark, and there is a huge scope of different publications which address the impact of the bacteria on neurotransmitters in the brain. Well, there are neuroendocrine cells which have a direct connection with the autonomic nerve system, and good bacteria release compounds and molecules which trigger the activation of these cells, and that changes the neurotransmitters in the brain. And so it has been published, that's a huge panel of different publications showing that depending on the composition of your microbiome in the gut, you can be happy
or sad,
or you have anxiety, or you have depression. So it's a mood swinger actually. And with good bacteria, you feel happy. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
And this is a personal thing. I actually notice it myself, and it's one of those things. And also what I love is that it makes perfect sense of getting yourself well, not treating the symptom, as we say,
right,
and actually treating the root cause. The other thing that I think I found really interesting when I started to do a little bit of study on your product in particular was how much of your immune system is actually controlled by your gut. I think, is it true to say that modern science has really only realised in the last few years how important your gut bacteria is for your immune system, for your whole body?
Absolutely. There's nothing to comment actually. Every immune cell in the gut which is belonging to the innate immune system, which is the non-specific immune system, is having receptors on its surface which are called PAMs and DAMPs. DAMP stands for danger associated molecular patterns, and they are activated by molecules released by bacteria. So different bacteria releases different molecules and can trigger this DAMP activation, and then these immune cells are activated and release cytokines which make your environment acid.
Yeah.
Now, this is something you really have to see, that the more acid our body is, the less our stem cells are able to repair. In an acid knee joint, if you inject stem cells, they would die. So only in a non-inflamed, non-acid environment, the stem cells can repair, can prevent aging, can bring down insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is always happening in an acid environment. So all these metabolic and aging related parameters are also dependent on your microbiome.
Yeah, I find it's so fascinating, and I mean the anti-aging thing is something, as you know, personally I'm very interested in. And the other thing, it's about being able to prevent disease. That's the thing that I'm really focused on at the moment. I think because in our modern society we're so used to, going to the doctor and walking out 5 minutes later with a prescription.
Yeah.
And that prescription is really only, as I said earlier, dealing with the symptom. It's not actually fixing the problem. And I think it's really important to point out that this product is completely natural. It's got all organic, natural ingredients delivered to you in the liquid form, which, as you said, creates its own vitamins. So there's all good things happening there and no negatives as far as I can see.
Well, I haven't seen any negative side effects from the product unless you really drink gallons of it. Then you might suffer from bloating and diarrhea.
Right.
But in the range we talk about how to use it, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I fully agree to you. It's the moment you prevent chronic disease, you postpone aging. And
Yes.
you might even think about reversing aging.
You know, it's such a hot topic at the moment for those people that have done any research on where regenerative medicine or anti-aging was the old term for it, where that's going these days. And I think the thing is that I can see why f2-M as a product is really good from an internal point of view. And of course it's to do with your nutrient intake and all those other lifestyle choices and all those other things as well. But how can it also help children? You know, because you think about children are going into an environment at school all the time, and you know the old thing is that your child comes home and gives you the cold that they get. So can f2-M be used in children, obviously in a smaller dosage or something like that?
Well, yes, in very young children up to 2 years, I still hesitate to give it.
Yeah.
But it's not clear. Maybe it would help. Because, look, there is a very strong correlation between the microbiome of the mother and the child, which I already pointed out. But if a mother takes antibiotics during she is pregnant, that has a significant impact on the microbiome of the child.
Yes.
And we know that a longer-lasting antibiotic intake would lead to a higher risk of autoimmune disease and diabetes in the child later on. Now, the other thing is a cesarean. If there's a non-natural delivery, this child will only get the scope of microbiomes, of microbes of the skin. And that would be extremely narrow microbiome. So that can be supplemented with the product very, very powerfully. And a lot of doctors in the US already take release liquid from the vagina and give it the child, because after a cesarean delivery, in order to strengthen and
to
broaden,
propagate back the mother's microbiome.
So that's a big open question still, but we more and more learn that these bacteria have healing capacity and preventing capacity. One other thing is fecal transplantation. In children who do not respond anymore to any treatment, as a last resort of treatment, we take stool from a healthy person and transfer it to these suffering children. And as a matter of fact, it's powerful to heal inflammatory bowel disease.
Yes, it's incredible. I've actually read some studies on it.
Yeah, what I'm pointing out is that the paradigm not to use bacteria, to be afraid of bacteria. If you use the proper good bacteria, you can kill bad bacteria.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Another interesting one, I was asked recently about animals.
Yeah.
So, you know, horses, cats and dogs, things like that. Obviously some similar things, over processed food, or they might be in a heavy workload environment or something like that. Have you created a probiotic that can help our pets?
That's a very important question. Of course, any living organism on this planet is seeded, colonized with bacteria. Any animal, any coral, algae, everything. So we were looking into the microbiome of horses. As I mentioned already, the cow. Horses have a different scope of bacteria, which are important for their metabolism, well-being. So we identified 10 very important bacteria, and we put them together in a specific horse-specific preparation and formula. So it's available, and another one for smaller animals like cats and dogs. Yeah.
It's been so incredible today to talk to you about things, you know, like I'm passionate about this because I've used it myself.
Yeah.
I can see all of the benefits. But it was just the common sense approach you had. Here you are as a specialist doctor, immunology, transplantation and all of that, and yet you just know so well how important it is for getting your own immune system about the gut microbiome.
Absolutely.
And so for me, that's one of the most wonderful things about the product. I really thank you for putting in all the research, the time and the years of blood, sweat and tears, as they say, in getting this product out into the market.